What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Eclectic Collector channel. Today I wanted to do a new Let's Talk About, and given that we are in October, I want this whole month to be nothing but horror-based stuff. Only this isn't necessarily a horror manga, though it does feature monsters you would find in horror stories. Like, we got a wolfman that looks like Blythe from Elden Ring. He does to me. He looks nothing like Blythe, but he does to me because anytime I see a wolfman, I just immediately compare them to Blythe. There's also like goblins and whatnot in this story, and just different little creatures like that. And if you've read Goblin Slayer, then you know the goblins in that story are terrifying, horrible creatures. But in this one, they're like much more lighthearted, and it's definitely not what I was maybe expecting going into it. But it's been quite a bit of an enjoyable experience for me, and I enjoyed it so much that I wrote a whole review about it, and I really want to talk about it with you all. So I hope you'll join me on this journey as we talk about the first volume of Soara and the House of Monsters. Soara and the House of Monsters was written and drawn by Hidenori Yamaji. Imagine training your whole life, day in and day out, for a chance to become a slayer of monsters. Then the day finally comes when you can avenge your family and friends who were ruthlessly slaughtered by them, only to find out monsters and humans have signed a peace treaty. You are now left without a purpose, and all of that training was for naught. However, you are freed from your burden according to the king. The burden is in fact not lifted, not for Soara, who did lose her whole family and has no friends. She no longer has a purpose. For a story that feels like it wants to relish in friendship and understanding, there are some unfortunate events that take place. Soara's backstory is rather heartbreaking. It doesn't quite reach soloist in a cage levels of misery, but it does toe that line for a brief section. I don't want to give too much away that will inevitably ruin your experience, but it is a much more hopeful story than others I've experienced and talked about on the channel. Some immediate impressions I got were that this felt like, instead of being Monster Hunter World, it feels like Monster Builder World. It would give credence to the name of the story, Soara and the House of Monsters. At one point early on, we get a breakdown of the renovation of a goblin den, and we get renovation breakdowns throughout the rest of the story as well for each project these dwarves take on. The architects in the story are dwarven builders who, I guess, go around and fix monsters' lairs. The dwarves turn the goblin hideout that was once dark and dank into a proper house. And of course, the goblins hate it because they like the dark and dank. But as the dwarven builders show them, there are still aspects of it that are like their old abode. It's cool to see this take on a fantasy story, which diverges from a scorned character wanting revenge for a family killed by monsters. That is how it starts, but that is quickly thrown out the window as stated before. I like that Soara is still able to use the skills she learned in the pursuit of slaying monsters to, instead of killing them, help them. She at one point uses her vast skill as a swordsman to break thick ice and unleash a dormant volcano. The molten lava is then used to heat up a home, acting as the fire to boil the water reserves beneath the abode. It feels like she essentially becomes the muscle to protect the dwarves, who have no real battle skills, given that all their time is spent crafting and building. The dwarves share their meals with her, and take her in as an additional member of their party, Soara was treated more monstrously by human beings than she ever was by actual monsters. This world even has its own version of the mail service in the form of courier flies, which deliver packages and basic mail. It feels so lived in, with different creatures having super specific jobs that tie into their inherent abilities. Well done on Hidenori Yamaji's part for that. Payments for services rendered are anywhere from hawk feathers to a jar of slime. Money is not the only tender the dwarves will take if they're getting any money at all. There is a line I really liked that summarizes the randomness of this story super well, and I won't give context to it to leave some surprises intact, but the line is, "I can't live in fear of some demon lord my whole life. I'm an architect." I had an unreal amount of fun reading this tale. It's definitely better than what I might have thought it would be. I was mostly sold on the cover art and went in blind, not knowing a thing about it, and came out pleasantly surprised. It is my hope that you won't sleep on this one, but I understand completely if it's not for you. I love the artwork for the story by Hidenori Yamaji. The characters are well detailed, and so far it has been a pretty entertaining story to read. It's a nice sort of adventure fantasy tale, definitely geared towards a teenaged audience. It has the typical fantasy creatures like goblins and dragons, fairies and dwarves, and the like, but in a light you might not have seen them before. I know for me, that was definitely the case, and I look forward enthusiastically to reading more. So if you haven't read this story, I hope that you will want to check it out after watching this video. I kind of randomly came across it. I don't remember how. I just sometimes will randomly just come across things, and I'll, put it on the shelf, and out of nowhere I'll just feel like an inclination to, check that specific story out. And Soara and the House of Monsters ended up being that, story that, for whatever reason, just seeing that artwork really just sold me. And I think I got this from Right Stuff, who is sadly going out of business, or not necessarily going out of business. They're merging with Crunchyroll. So, by the time this video comes out, they might already be completely engulfed by Crunchyroll and become a part of Crunchyroll. If not, if this video comes out before the 10th, they're actually having a sale. As of making this video, they're having a sale. Right Stuff is having their last sale ever, I guess, since that's pretty much going to be the end of Right Stuff anime. And that's pretty wild because I spent so much time, just scrolling through Right Stuff and buying so much, manga from Right Stuff anime. And a lot of the stuff on these shelves I got from Right Stuff. So to them, to the Right Stuff, to the whole crew from Right Stuff, I say thank you so much for, being around for as long as almost as long as I got into manga. I've bought stuff from Right Stuff. I wasn't always, buying stuff from them because I didn't even know they existed until I don't even know at one point in time, of my collecting. But once I started buying from them, it was just kind of it was just snowballed, and I would just always, see what deals they had, and then just put a bunch of stuff into a cart, and then wait until I had a nice, a nice chunk of side cash that I could then turn around and, hit up Right Stuff for a sale or whatever. And I got Soara and the House of Monsters from Right Stuff. And the story has just been an absolute blast to read. And I finished the whole damn thing. And, dude, it was one of the most fun stories that I've read in a while. And I like the juxtaposition. I like the way that, it starts with this girl who is training her whole life to fight these monsters, and then once she gets the ability to fight them, once she's strong enough to fight them, the whole war between the monsters and the human beings is cut off. This is the way I looked at this is the way it's set up, and the way that Soara's whole arc is set up in the beginning before everything happens, is that she's an adventurer and she's gonna go do some adventuring and take out, monsters. Only that part falls right out from beneath her. Goes right out underneath her feet, and then the rest of the story is just basically like, going from, being trained to kill monsters to now you're building houses for the monsters you were supposed to kill. I feel like all the different monsters we've met in the story from the beginning to the end of this volume have just been solid. They've all been pretty well put together. Hidenori Yamaji definitely knocked it out of the park, and he's got a lot of stories that are kind of similar like this. I think he's written like 2 or 3 other manga series, and if you look at the artwork and you look at the story type, they all kind of have the same kind of a feel to them. Like they look like they're made for, like, I want to say like teenagers, like 15, 16-year-olds or something. Yeah, I mean, even right here, like the demographic for this is like 13. So yeah, like the demographic for this is even like 13 years old and up. So I haven't seen anything or read anything in this that would make me think that it isn't suited, for like literally anybody. Because I do sometimes talk about things on here that are like super mature and super mature rated. And this one is like, if you've got like, like a little cousin or something, but you're worried about showing them some manga because you don't want to show them, something. Alright, so dog just decided to go absolutely bananas. I think this is a good time. I think this is a good place to close it right now while the dog decided to just go absolutely crazy. So I just want to say a quick thank you so much for hanging out with me. We're gonna close this out with the crescendo of a dog barking in the background.
Yo, it's himself, the Shadowrunners clique, aka Sleep All Out. Take you on a mental and live for one day, y'all. Sheets, y'all. Guns, y'all. Yo, who got the guns? Who got the coke? Hustling them through like big punch cholesterol before he croak. Rest in peace, but I bless in peace and live to one day lay in shoots. Rap over beats and tell wild stories, the mythology mystery. Choke on your own misery. Fuck them, we're the wild bunch. Yo, I asked him if this bike could punch. This shit made me lose my lunch. Bro grabbed the rocket, I said chill before he cocked it.